The Galactic Concord had always looked down on humanity, treating them as nothing more than an insignificant species barely worthy of notice. For years, the powerful alien empires saw Earth as a young world, fragile and naive, a planet full of creatures who had only just begun their journey into the stars. Humanity had joined the interstellar community with hopes of peace, eager to prove themselves as allies rather than enemies, but the Concord never accepted them as equals. Instead, they saw humanity as a resource, a planet rich in minerals, a species too weak to resist, a target that could be easily conquered. When Earth refused to surrender its territories and bow to their demands, the aliens saw it as an insult. They decided to make an example of humanity, to break their spirit before they could become a threat. The attack came without warning. Massive Concord warships descended upon Earth's defenses, shattering satellites and space stations in a brutal opening strike. Cities burned as orbital bombardments rained destruction, and millions of innocent lives were lost within hours. The Galactic Concord expected immediate surrender, believing that humanity would beg for mercy, but they underestimated the very species they sought to dominate. Amidst the chaos and ruin, Earth's leaders broadcast a desperate message to the Concord, a final plea for peace, for reason. But the aliens only laughed. To them, humanity's words were nothing more than the cries of the weak, the desperate attempts of a species that refused to accept its place beneath the mighty Concord. They mocked the humans for thinking they ever had a choice. "You are nothing," declared the Supreme Chancellor of the Concord, his voice echoing across the stars. "Your people exist because we allow it. And now, we do not." With that, the Concord made its final demand total surrender. If humanity laid down its weapons, if Earth handed over its resources, perhaps they would be allowed to survive as slaves. If not, the Concord would wipe them out, erase their existence from the galaxy as they had done to countless others before. It was a warning, a cruel declaration of power. But the aliens did not realize the mistake they had made. Because humanity was not weak. Humanity was not broken. And above all else, humanity would never forget what had been done to them. In the silence that followed the transmission, something changed. The fear that had gripped Earth turned into something far more dangerous resolve. The leaders of humanity stood before the galaxy and answered with a warning of their own. "You pushed too far," the message declared, calm but filled with an unmistakable promise. "Now we will not hold back." The Galactic Concord had assumed they had already seen the full extent of humanity's power, that Earth's forces were finished, but they had no idea what was coming. For years, humanity had played by the rules, holding back, hiding its true capabilities, avoiding war whenever possible. But now, there was no reason to hide anymore. The moment the Concord shattered the illusion of peace, they had unleashed something they would soon regret. And as the last human warships vanished from known space, as the ashes of Earth still smoldered under the cold light of distant stars, one terrifying truth settled over the galaxy: humanity was not defeated. It was preparing to strike back. The Galactic Concord believed humanity was finished. After the devastating attack on Earth, they saw no fleets rallying for a counterattack, no desperate human soldiers attempting to reclaim lost ground. To the aliens, it was proof that humanity had been broken. Their homeworld burned, their colonies were scattered, and their presence in the galaxy had seemingly vanished overnight. The Concord's high commanders celebrated their victory, confident that humanity had accepted its fate. Reports came in from occupied human territories, silent streets, abandoned stations, and a species that had gone quiet. But what the aliens failed to realize was that humanity had not given up. They had not surrendered. They had disappeared because they wanted to the darkest corners of space. Beyond the reach of Concord patrols, humanity's true strength was awakening. Deep within hidden military stations, buried beneath the surface of desolate moons, inside asteroid fields that no alien dared enter, humanity had been preparing for this war. Long before the first shot was fired, the Concord had always underestimated them, assuming they were nothing more than a fragile race that had stumbled into the stars. They had no idea that humanity had been watching, learning, and adapting to the brutal reality of the galaxy. While other species relied on their long histories of warfare, Humanity had something far more dangerous: ingenuity, desperation, and a refusal to accept defeat. The moment the first Concorde warship had fired upon Earth, humanity had activated plans that had been in place for decades. Secret shipyards, unknown to even their own allies, came to life. Factories hidden in the depths of dead planets roared as they produced weapons beyond anything the galaxy had seen before. The humans had spent years studying alien technology, improving it, perfecting it, and now they were about to unleash it. The Concorde expected a slow, weak resistance, isolated human warships attempting to fight back with outdated weapons, scattered survivors launching ineffective strikes. Instead, something far more terrifying emerged from the void. The first attack was so sudden, so precise, that the Concorde barely had time to react. A fleet of their warships patrolling near a captured human colony simply disappeared. No distress signals, no warnings, just silence. When reinforcements arrived, they found nothing but wreckage, massive battleships torn apart with surgical precision, their most advanced shields useless against whatever had hit them. The aliens had never seen weapons like these before. Humanity had not just rebuilt its fleet, it had created something entirely new. Their ships moved faster than the Concorde thought possible, striking without warning and vanishing before an enemy could retaliate. Their weapons, enhanced by stolen and repurposed alien technology, could pierce the hulls of even the most fortified dreadnought. Every strike was calculated, every battle a message. Humanity was not simply fighting back. It was hunting those who had once hunted them. Panic spread through the Concorde's ranks as more fleets vanished, more strongholds fell. It was no longer a war, it was a reckoning. The very species they had mocked and oppressed was now waging a campaign of destruction, unlike anything the galaxy had witnessed. Alien commanders who had once laughed at humanity's weakness now whispered of ghosts in the void, of ships that appeared from nowhere and left nothing behind but silence. The leaders of the Concorde demanded answers. How had humanity built such weapons? How had they created a fleet capable of tearing through their strongest defenses? The truth was more horrifying than they could imagine. Humanity had never been weak. They had only been waiting, holding back, watching. And now, there was nothing stopping them from unleashing their full strength. Across the galaxy, the Concorde's forces scrambled to defend their territories, but it was already too late. The war they thought had ended had only just begun, and this time, humanity would make sure there would be no mercy. The Galactic Concorde had spent centuries ruling the stars, crushing weaker civilizations and expanding its empire without resistance. It had grown arrogant, believing itself untouchable. To them, humanity had been just another species, a minor inconvenience that needed to be subdued. But now, something was different. Their patrols were vanishing, their warships were being torn apart, and their greatest strongholds were falling one by one. Fear spread like wildfire through the ranks of the Concorde. The same species they had tried to erase was now hunting them, striking with a precision and brutality that sent shivers through the highest levels of command. They had expected humanity to fade into history, broken and forgotten, but instead, they had awakened something unstoppable. Humanity was no longer defending itself. It was retaliating. The first real sign of human vengeance came in the form of an attack on the fortress world of Zorvac 6, a heavily armed Concorde military base deep in their own territory. The planet was a symbol of their power, a place that had never been touched by war. Its skies were filled with warships, its surface covered in planetary shields, and its orbit bristling with defense platforms designed to destroy entire fleets before they could even approach. The Concorde considered it impenetrable. But humanity had no intention of attacking head-on. The first sign of trouble was a sudden blackout across the planet's communications network. Concorde officers panicked as their sensors went dark, their ships unable to receive orders, their ground forces blinded. And then, without warning, the human fleet arrived. They did not come from hyperspace lanes, nor did they appear on scanners until it was too late. Sleek black warships, moving faster than anything the Concorde had ever encountered, slipped past the defenses like ghosts. By the time the first alarm sounded, the battle was already over. Human strike teams landed on the planet's surface, moving with terrifying efficiency, eliminating key targets and sabotaging defenses before the Concorde could even react. Explosions erupted across military installations, war factories crumbled into flames, and command centers were reduced to rubble before their leaders could escape. The humans did not waste time with speeches, did not offer surrender. They had come with a message written in fire. Humanity was not just fighting back. Humanity was here to destroy. The few Concorde survivors who managed to flee the massacre spread the horrifying truth across the galaxy. The humans had advanced beyond anything the Concorde had expected. They weren't just using stolen alien technology, they had improved upon it. Their ships were faster, their weapons more lethal, and their tactics unpredictable. Every counterattack the Concorde attempted ended the same way: failure. Fleets sent to recapture human-occupied zones never returned. Outposts that had stood for centuries were wiped out overnight. The Concorde's mightiest generals, once feared across the stars, now found themselves hunted. It was as if humanity had been preparing for this war long before it had even begun. And in many ways, they had. For years, the humans had studied their enemies, learned their weaknesses, and built weapons in the shadows. They had fought wars on their own world, wars that had forged them into something the Concorde had never encountered before, a species that refused to be conquered. They did not fight for territory or resources. They fought for vengeance, for justice, for the millions of lives the Concorde had stolen from them. And unlike the alien empires, humanity did not fear war. They embraced it. They adapted. They evolved. Desperation began to set in among the Concorde leadership. They had spent centuries ruling through fear, but now they were the ones afraid. They tried to reinforce their borders, sending fleets to protect their core worlds, but it was pointless. The humans did not attack like any enemy they had faced before. They struck without warning, their fleets appearing in places no one expected, hitting supply lines, crippling production centers, and systematically dismantling the very foundation of the Concorde's power. The Concorde was no longer fighting an enemy. They were being hunted. As planet after planet fell, as more fleets were lost, the Supreme Chancellor of the Concorde gathered the remaining high-ranking officials in a desperate attempt to plan a counter-offensive. But even in the safety of their hidden war councils, paranoia grew. Every shadow felt like a threat, every missing patrol ship a sign that the humans were coming. The once mighty rulers of the galaxy, who had laughed at humanity's weakness, now spoke in hushed whispers, their voices trembling with fear. For the first time in history, they knew what it felt like to stand against an enemy that would not stop. The retaliation had begun, and humanity had no intention of holding back. The war was no longer about survival. It was about making sure the Concorde would never threaten Earth again. The aliens had made a fatal mistake when they attacked humanity. They had believed they were striking down a lesser species. Instead, they had unleashed the greatest threat the galaxy had ever seen. And now, no force in the universe could save them from what was coming. The Galactic Concorde had once believed itself untouchable. For centuries, it had ruled the stars with absolute dominance, crushing any who dared to resist, bending weaker species to its will with fear and overwhelming firepower. No enemy had ever posed a true threat. No civilization had ever survived defiance. The Concorde's fleets were the largest, their weapons the deadliest, their fortresses impenetrable. Their leaders had grown so comfortable in their power that they had long since stopped considering the possibility of defeat. But now, as their warships burned and their fleets crumbled, they realized the horrifying truth: humanity was not like the others. Humanity was not afraid. Humanity did not break. And most terrifying of all, humanity had come prepared to destroy everything the Concorde had built. Panic had spread across the Empire like wildfire. It had started with whispers of missing fleets, of human warships appearing and disappearing without warning, of entire strongholds reduced to debris before they could even send a distress signal. But now, it was no longer just whispers. The core worlds of the Concorde, planets that had never seen war in thousands of years, were now under attack. The great capital worlds, once considered the beating heart of the Empire, were burning. The humans had no interest in drawn-out battles, no desire for conquest. They struck with terrifying precision, bypassing defenses, disabling planetary shields with weapons the Concord had never seen before. Their fleets, sleek and black, moved faster than anything in the Concord's arsenal, their weapons cutting through even the most advanced alien warships, as if they were made of paper. The once proud admirals of the Concord, who had spent lifetimes basking in their own victories, now found themselves powerless. Their strongest fleets, sent to stop the human advance, were torn apart with ease. Massive battleships, considered the pride of the Empire, were reduced to drifting wrecks in mere minutes. Every counterattack failed. Every strategy collapsed. Humanity was always one step ahead, striking where they were least expected. The fear that had started in the lower ranks now reached the highest levels of leadership. The Supreme Chancellor, the ruler of the Concord, watched in silence as reports flooded in cities falling, colonies lost, entire fleets wiped from existence. The very foundation of their rule was collapsing before their eyes. Desperation took hold. The Concord's leaders, once arrogant and untouchable, scrambled to find a way to stop the relentless advance of humanity. They called upon their oldest allies, begging for reinforcements, but no one answered. The other empires had seen what humanity was capable of, and none of them dared to stand in their way. The Concord was alone, abandoned by those who once worshipped its power. There was no grand alliance coming to their aid, no final counterattack that would turn the tide of war. There was only the crushing realization that their era of dominance was over. The final blow came with the fall of Zithar Prime, the capital world of the Concord, the heart of their empire. It was a planet of towering cities, endless armies, and defenses that had never been breached. The Concord had always believed that even if their fleets failed, Zithar Prime would stand strong. But humanity had no intention of launching a conventional invasion. They did not march armies onto the surface. They did not waste time with diplomacy. Instead, they did something far worse. They shattered the planet's defenses in a single, calculated strike, rendering its once great shields useless. Then, without a single warning, the sky darkened as humanity's warships appeared in orbit. Before the Concord could react, the bombardment began. The humans did not target military bases alone. They struck the very infrastructure that kept the capital alive. Power grids failed. Supply routes collapsed. Communication networks were torn apart. Within hours, the most powerful world in the galaxy had been reduced to chaos. The once mighty leaders of the Concord, who had ruled without question for generations, now cowered in underground bunkers, trapped on their own world, knowing there was no escape. The last message sent from Zithar Prime was a desperate plea for mercy. But humanity had not forgotten the burning cities of Earth, the cries of their people, the billions lost when the Concord had decided to make an example of them. The humans did not respond with words. They responded with silence. And then the final attack began. Zithar Prime, the greatest jewel of the Concord's empire, fell in a single night. By morning, nothing remained but ruin. Across the galaxy, the surviving worlds of the Concord surrendered without a fight. The war was over. The invincible empire that had ruled the stars for centuries had been erased in the span of months. Humanity had not just won. They had ended the Concord. And now, as the smoke cleared and the last remnants of the once great empire crumbled into dust, the message was clear: humanity had risen, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The war was over. The Galactic Concord, the once unstoppable empire that had ruled the stars with fear and brutality, was no more. Its fleets lay in ruins, its worlds either abandoned or surrendered, and its leaders, those who had survived, were hunted fugitives, scattered across the galaxy with nowhere left to run. Zithar Prime, the heart of their power, was now a lifeless graveyard of shattered cities and burning ruins. Where once they had dictated the laws of the galaxy, now they were nothing more than a cautionary tale. But humanity was not finished. Victory was only the beginning. The galaxy, for the first time in centuries, stood on the edge of something new. And it was humanity that would decide what came next. In the months following the fall of the Concord, chaos gripped the stars. Without the iron rule of the Empire, old rivalries flared, Opportunistic warlords rose from the shadows, and desperate remnants of the Concord's former power sought revenge. The galaxy teetered on the brink of anarchy. Some alien species feared humanity would become the new conquerors, taking the Concord's place and ruling with an even greater cruelty. Others whispered of vengeance, of secret fleets waiting to strike back. But humanity had no desire to rule through fear. They had not fought this war to replace the Concord with another empire of tyranny. They had fought to ensure that no one else would suffer as they had. And so, they moved swiftly, not just with warships and weapons, but with something even more powerful: order. Across the former territories of the Concord, human fleets did not come as conquerors, but as enforcers of peace. Worlds that had once been enslaved were given a choice: join humanity's new alliance, or be left to fend for themselves. Many species, having lived under the Concord's oppression for centuries, accepted without hesitation. They had seen what humanity was capable of, how they had destroyed the greatest empire in history, and they understood that resisting them was futile. But more than fear, they saw something unexpected: justice. Unlike the Concord, humanity did not demand absolute obedience. They did not strip planets of their resources or force civilizations into servitude. Instead, they offered protection, trade, and the promise that never again would a species be allowed to dominate the galaxy unchecked. It was not a rule of force. It was a rule of balance. Still, there were those who resisted. The last remaining admirals of the Concord, those who had escaped the destruction of Zithar Prime, gathered in the lawless regions of space, determined to rebuild their lost empire. They launched desperate attacks against human-controlled worlds, hoping to reignite the war. But they had already lost. Humanity had learned from them, had studied their tactics, had evolved past them. The final remnants of the old empire were hunted down one by one, their hidden strongholds destroyed, their fleets annihilated before they could rise again. There would be no second chance. Humanity would not allow another Concord to take shape. As the months passed, the galaxy slowly began to stabilize. The new alliance, led by humanity, spread across the stars, uniting former enemies under a single purpose: to ensure that no empire, no species, would ever again hold absolute power over the rest. Humanity did not seek to control the galaxy, only to protect it. And though some feared them, none dared to challenge them. The lesson had been learned. The species that had once been seen as weak, as unworthy of the stars, had proven themselves to be the most dangerous force the galaxy had ever known. In the halls of the new Galactic Council, where leaders of dozens of species now gathered as equals, there was one unspoken truth: humanity had changed everything. They had reshaped the balance of power, ended an empire that had seemed invincible, and forged a new path for the future. Whether the galaxy thrived or fell into darkness again would depend on the choices made in the years to come. But one thing was certain: humanity would never be underestimated again.